Hey folks, my name is Ravish and welcome back to another video in the series of DevOps Interviews. Now, I have a profile with me today. The person that I have interviewed today is around 14 years of experience and he has started his career in admin side but then he moved to cloud and DevOps. Previously when he joined his IT industry, then he did not have much information on that, but then later he learned and became an architect. So today's interview is very interesting because there are not he's an architect basically. So the questions that I have asked him in this interview are not basically like one or two liner questions. I have given him scenarios and how would he proceed on that. Alright, so the total years of experience as I talked is around 14 years of experience, and in cloud he has mostly experience on AWS, close to 8 years of experience. He has also worked on Azure and then around 4 years of experience on that. He's very well spoken, very good communication skills, and I was impressed by the way he has answered the questions. He worked on a bit on firmware part as well, and right now in the current organization uh, he just architect the solution. I mean, he does have hands on a lot of things, but he is mostly on the architect side. So the questions will be something like I've asked him an end-to-end solution what he'll do if we talk about the banking application. The security has to be utmost. So I've asked the question on the basis of that, what will you incorporate, and if I have to create the infrastructure using CloudFormation or any IAC for that matter, how will you incorporate it, how will you test it, and then the deployment process as well. That's one thing. We talked a bit on Snyk as well, or some people call it Sneak. SNYK is the spelling of it. We called about scanning part, how will it scan, the third party dependency, because sometimes what happens when you use some kind of applications, they pull third party dependency. So that's one thing. And we talked about the image part in the Docker, in which the Snyk will do testing as well, and how we deal with critical, high and low kind of errors. That was one part of it, and there was one more follow-up question on that. If there is an infrastructure that we create on the AWS part, how do you check it? How would you test that everything that you wanted to create is created perfectly or not? That was a part of it. Then on that, how do we incorporate unit testing and integration testing with the pipeline, and how would you go about it? What is the difference between, very basic question on the basis of or on the questions that I was following up. And then at the end, I did a Kubernetes scenario based question, and in which I asked him what is the budgeting part, the breakdown, and the operability, and other things rounded off. I gave him a question on the carpooling company, that how would you increase the infrastructure, how would you migrate monolithic to microservices, what is the rule of an architecture over there. As a DevOps, what will you do in the deployment part? Because what happens is when you have an application, monolithic application, it's a like simple pipeline, then you can deploy the product. But in microservices, you have to create an infrastructure for each microservices, and then a gatekeeper kind of a thing that talks to each microservices, this and that. So a fair overview of what exactly we have been doing, and the deployment side problems what can come for a DevOps. So single-handedly, it is one of the best interviews, one of the best conversation that I recently had with an architect. And don't take it as an interview kind of a thing. You can hear it as a podcast kind of a thing, because the way he is explaining things is really mature, and his experience talks, and he can explain everything well and good. So very good interview. Note down the questions if you want to. Look at the way he's answering, because most of the times it's not always about the technical knowledge that a person have. Most of the times it is the way he answers the questions, the way he or she answers the question, the way they proceed to a problem approach, that matters. Okay, all right. And this candidate was recommended and was selected. All right. So I hope everything is clear to you, and please, I would like to request that if you're new over here, kindly subscribe the channel, because it really motivates me to create more content like this. So without further ado, let's get started. So what did you
Sure.
use in ECS over there? Like what services did you create?
So it was the application. We used to have anywhere between 17 to 30 microservices. So the way it used to work is
You said
you
ECS,
will
right? ECS,
ECS,
container
Elastic
services.
Container. Yes, yes.
So like
Elastic Container.
EC2 Fargate or something like that?
EC2, yes, yes.
Yes.
Initially
Okay.
EC2, yeah. So
Okay.
how it will work is our build pipeline will create an image that will be pushed to ECR, and basically you in the initial phase you'll use CloudFormation to create these templates, which will contain this image tag, and in the service definition. So what happens is you will create a task definition in ECR. So that is the where you'll put your image and everything. Then on top of it, you will wrap it up with a service definition. So in service definition, you'll configure auto scaling and those features like how many replicas you want and all that. And even service is the entity which gets connected to your load balancer, such as application, network, or so forth and so on. And then once you have that finally, all that a service plus task definition, that's what constitutes to a running microservice, at least one of them.
Okay.
And then, of course, since it's Amazon's own service, all the logs, when you configure task definition at that time, it directly links to CloudWatch. So all your container logs are by default logged into the CloudWatch. So that was, that was a good experience for me. I got to know a lot about the microservices, how we want to deploy it.
Okay.
So post IBM, and in IBM we also got introduced to their own cloud called SoftLayer.
SoftLayer.
It was at SoftLayer.
I thought they had Bluemix or something.
Bluemix was something different, but at the initial stage, this was called SoftLayer. Like
Okay.
at least maybe it was an internal name or something. But it was at a very nascent level. It was, I think it was just beginning. They had a few services there, but I think it was before this Red Hat acquisition. So it was a very basic layout, and they didn't also used to roll it out to every client. There was very specific few clients were there. But after that, I think they went with the Red Hat, acquired and used those services. So post that, I joined a pharma company called BioClinica. So BioClinica,
heard about it.
Yeah. So BioClinica is basically into clinical trials. So we have we had three divisions. One was drug safety, medical imaging, and then the clinical trials application teams. So we used to cater to all three of the entities, not initially, but gradually. And I also set up the entire AWS infrastructure there with the help of the IT teams, because we used to have a very small footprint in Azure, but later we decided to go with AWS. We had a smaller footprint there as well, but we decided to expand it to other teams. And there, primarily, I was hired in as a deployment automation engineer. So my goal was to set up the culture of DevOps in the organization, specific to this clinical trials organization, because we had Azure DevOps. Now that was the SaaS offering. By then, it was known as Azure DevOps and all. This was in 2018, no, not 2018, 2016. So we used to have like code. For some teams, the code repositories were there in Azure Git repos, but not for all of them, because it was heavily regulated environment, primarily based on HIPAA guidelines. So we slowly migrated a lot of the application code into the Azure repos, and from there we kickstarted this build process for each and every team. For each team, it used to be different. And there I worked with different types of applications, like .NET Core, and some Java applications as well. But most of them were containerized. Java applications are a bit more advanced than the .NET Core ones. So there the entire workflow used to look like, you have Azure DevOps for CI/CD, and then from there we again used to deploy to ECS, primarily ECS EC2 model. Later, we also experimented with Fargate and Kubernetes as well. The Kubernetes was pretty new at that point of time in AWS, pretty new in the sense AWS traditionally, before EKS, was primarily running COPS workloads a lot. So I think EKS was pretty new at that time. So we started experimenting with it. We initially didn't go with EKS. We had our own Kubernetes clusters created for testing purposes, and once we were comfortable with that, we started moving some applications, but primarily our workloads used to run in ECS. And then post that, presently I'm working for an organization called, in India, it's called Hyclone Life Sciences. It was part of GE, but later another organization came in and they bought it from them. So it spun out as a new organization now. So here also it's a kind of a similar role. So in BioClinica, I eventually became from automation engineer to principal architect in DevOps and cloud. So I continued in a similar role in the present organization, wherein again here also there was no DevOps when we were in GE. So now we are out of GE, so we wanted to implement DevOps and bring in some of those practices into the organization. So right now we are building the team. We are incorporating DevOps in lot of the teams, software development teams here. And this again is a regulated environment. This being primarily to GXP rather than HIPAA. So yeah, so my day-to-day activities normally go in either it could be anything from building pipelines in Azure DevOps or connecting those pipelines to AWS, or it could be we have also kickstarted a project wherein we are automating our service or workflows using Terraform. So even those kind of requests we manage. So yeah, end-to-end automation. And we also deal with a lot of IoT, I'll not say IoT, kind of IoT devices where we try to interface, try to create some pipelines which can interact with them.
Okay, so like I can see that you have a lot of variety of experience, around 14 years, right? So if I
Yeah.
ask you like how much experience you have in cloud, any cloud, private, public, so what would be the total
Yeah.
number?
In AWS, close to 8 years now in 2022, I would say.
Okay.
Close to 8 years. Could be 7 plus, almost touching 8, I would say. And Azure, 4 plus years. GCP, I had no experience. I had experimented with it on my own for Kubernetes, but that was fairly limited. And even for creation of bots, just experimenting. Uh, that's it. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And like in DevOps and like release and build engineering.
Release and build engineering, around 8 years of experience.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. But nowadays I don't get too much into build and release engineering because now since I'm working as an architect, I build the solutions in the cloud as well. So the responsibilities have increased a lot as compared to earlier. It was like very specific to build and release.
Okay, so like more of an architecting solutions on the cloud, less of a
Cloud and DevOps.
DevOps. Okay, okay,
Yeah.
great, great, great.
But
Okay.
it's not that I don't do hands-on. So hands-on is still there,
Uh-huh.
but not like, you sit and develop pipelines. So what I normally do is, let's say we are onboarding a project, so there will be few DevOps engineers who work alongside me. So I'll create the architecture. This is how the pipeline should look. They'll go ahead and build those pipelines. In some cases, I will give them a template of the pipeline. They will mimic that template and then later they'll improve it over a period of time.
Okay, so basically architecting solution and then someone
Correct.
down
Correct.
the line people will work on it. Okay, so like good
Correct.
topic. So let's talk about this only. Consider a scenario in which let's say any bank, XYZ bank, want to build a solution. Okay, so their application is like kind of an application. Have you heard about this product known as Infosys has their own product which later went to Edgeworth. Uh, they have their own banking product.
Okay.
Heard about it?
No.
Okay. Anyway, so do you generally go to banks or something, or have you ever gone to a bank?
Yeah, yeah. Of
Okay, yeah,
course.
perfect.
Like,
So they have their software in which they get the details of the people and then
correct.
uh, they enter stuff over there and then create your own profile, that kind of a. So when we talk about banking, it has to be highly secure. Okay, I mean security is like optimal for has to be for everything, but like banking takes it a lot seriously because of financial stuff. So consider a scenario in which there is a banking solution, okay, and it can be written on any language for that you have already worked on Java stuff. So let's consider it's written on Java, and front end could be anything like Node, HTML, CSS, anything. I mean of your
Sure.
choice. So the client want to create a pipeline for this. Let's not talk about the developers. Developer will write their own code, push it into some kind of repository.
Sure.
You as a architect, how will you build a solution? Okay, so points to keep in mind. First is it has to be one touch deployment. Okay, I mean just the developer has to push it in. It has to go till let's say lower environment till staging, not till production. Okay, till staging. After that, we'll
Okay.
take a decision whether we have to go for the production or not. We see that's deployment and delivery part will take care of that. Till staging, it has to go. I want you to create a pipeline in which you'll use the tools to compile the code, build the code. I want you to use something for the security, static testing or dynamic testing or both. And let's say if it creates architecture for you have worked on AWS, then let's say AWS, either you can use CloudFormation, either you can use Terraform. It might be having some secrets, so what would be you doing for that? And till the end, it should be deployable. I mean, you should be delivering it. How would you
Okay.
architect a pipeline, like from top view?
Okay. Before we get into that, just a quick point which I wanted to make it. When I used to work in HSBC, those days we used to use Unix-based applications for this kind of for the customer entry. I think they used to be called as Hub or something
Okay.
in HSBC. So yeah. So yeah. So in what you have explained, it looks like we have like multiple different aspects to it. On one hand, you want to create a build and release pipeline. That's what my understanding is, wherein the developer checks in the code, then your continuous integration build will trigger. But you also touch base on the infrastructure of code, meaning that you also want to build the infrastructure as well, right?
Yes.
So is it that the infrastructure as code also should be part of the same pipeline, or
Yes,
there can be?
So basically, it would be like, let's say you have to use an EC2 service for that for deployment. For that, you have to create an infrastructure. So that's why we have to club it in such a way that it creates an infrastructure and then deploys to that infrastructure. Got it?
Okay. Yeah. Got it.
Yeah.
So this is how I will go about it. Now I will take an example of one of the recent projects that I'm working on. So because it mimics what you're trying to say, and yeah. So what I'll do is when it comes to the build pipelines and the security aspect of it, right? So you're talking about static and dynamic testing and so forth and so on. So I have so for static code analysis. We use tools such as SonarQube, but SonarQube generally doesn't have to doesn't need to be part of the same pipeline. It could be a different pipeline as well, because at the end of the day, SonarQube tells you what kind of bugs you have, what kind of vulnerabilities you may or may not have exposed. But the way I will create this pipeline is I will use a tool called Sneak initially. So
Sneak,
in the pipeline
S-N-E-A-K.
Sneak.
Okay.
Yeah, SNYP. So, so the way it will work is the pipeline will get triggered. Now, depending on the application, it can be Java, .NET, or whatever the case is. So there would be definitely be some unit tests that will run initially to, since you have checked in the code, the unit test will trigger. So based after they pass, let's say the unit test passes, then you do a Sneak scanning. Now, generally Sneak, what it does is you would basically configure Sneak in such a way that it connects to your CI/CD system. Now here we use Azure DevOps, so we have to do some configuration, but it can be anything. It could be Jenkins, GitHub, or anything. It just needs to look at your files such as package.json. It scans out the vulnerability parts from there. So it will detect the vulnerabilities in those packages which you are using, the external packages, I would say.
Third party, you
and
mean?
Also, yeah, third party libraries.
So SonarQube does that as well or not?
SonarQube does that. I have not used SonarQube for that purpose.
Okay.
What we do here is, like in SonarQube Enterprise, you get that feature of vulnerability also. So if you are in like different tier, I don't think you get the vulnerability of this kind. But Sneak actually specializes in that, and it detects, I would say, the detection. When we were doing the proof of concept, we found a lot more vulnerability detection in a much better way in Sneak than in SonarQube. So that's why we went with Sneak. So yeah. So coming back to the pipeline, the Sneak will scan for all these vulnerabilities. Now, the way Sneak categorizes the vulnerabilities is like critical, high, low, and medium. So if it finds, so it depends on us now, how you want to go about, responding to these vulnerabilities. Now, so obviously the critical and high are pretty high risk vulnerabilities. So what we'll do is, once Sneak scans, and if it finds a lot of critical and high risk vulnerabilities, the pipeline will fail there itself. So we have to go back and correct those vulnerabilities, and then we can redeploy.
So Sneak is part of your release pipeline right now or not?
It is part of build pipeline. So release, So release. What I mean by release, at least to me, is once you have the deployment package. For example, if it's a microservice, once you create that image, right? So that would be your build artifact. So then
Okay.
our deployment pipeline, what it will do is it will take that image and deploy it to your pod. So that pipeline is separate.
Okay.
So yeah, you have worked with Azure DevOps, so you
Yeah.
know this build and release. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that will not be part of the same, but it will be different pipeline. So yeah, so this will do that vulnerability scanning and so forth and so on. Now, apart from this, there are a lot more different types of vulnerabilities that can come in now, depending on the type of system that you're building, right? If say for example the application is microservice, right? And then after the sneak scanning, all we have done is we have determined that the application code that we have and even the SonarQube analysis and so forth. What we have determined is there is no vulnerabilities in the packages that we are using, and our code is clean. It is clean of bugs. But now comes the stage wherein you start, let's say if it's a microservice, right? You start building that image, right, based on your Docker files and so forth and so on. So there comes another layer of security wherein you need to scan those images as well. So Sneak actually has got multiple different tools. It actually can do that as well for you. So we will go and build the image, and in that step itself, we can include the Sneak to detect that vulnerabilities in the image, post the image is built. And let's say we find a lot of vulnerabilities there or some vulnerabilities which are critical to us. Then we again have another point of failure where we drop the image and and one good thing about Sneak is after any failure or success, it publishes a report which you can visualize in the console itself in Azure DevOps console, or you can log into Sneak and check it. So you will check that and go back and again obviously fix it. Now then, let's say
Sorry.
that stage also.
So
Yes.
you were talking about the image. So when you say image, are you talking about Docker image or something else?
Yes. Docker
Okay.
image.
So Snake will test the Docker image itself.
Yes. It will scan the image
Okay.
for any vulnerabilities, just like you have Trivy and other tools, right? So
Trivi,
which,
yeah, Trivi,
yeah,
yeah.
similar to that, I would say. I would say not exact similar, but yeah.
Okay,
So
great, yeah.
yeah, so we are past of that stage also, right? I mean, like the image is fine and good. Now you're built your image. Now comes your infrastructure building part, right? So obviously you have your image, but you need an infrastructure to deploy it, right? So you will, as you said, that you would want your infrastructure built in the same pipeline. Then what will we do is before, like obviously we will have our templates stored in our Git repo, the kind of a GitOps workflow. But before we go ahead and trigger that infrastructure build, right? What we will do is we will have we'll have another step wherein we'll use again Sneak scans infrastructure templates as well for, let's say, for any exposed secrets, or if it is not like if you have if it has some common vulnerability, such as maybe you have exposed your access PID when you're creating Terraform or something like that. So we will do that level of scanning as well, because that is important now, because we are getting at a different level. Now we are past our deployment development stages. Now we are talking about infrastructure. So this is another layer of security which you will include in your pipeline, build pipeline. So once Sneak starts scanning that, and let's say it finds some vulnerability, then again, so now the thing is that our development looks good, but our infrastructure templates have a problem. So it will fail at this stage, and then we have to go back and correct that, and then we move on to the next stage. But before we move on to the next stage, let's say this is again coming back to the infrastructure. For example, I'm just taking an example. Let's say we are deploying to some kind of a Kubernetes cluster. It could be any type of distribution. It could be K3s, KPOPs, or whatever the case is, right? So now, nowadays in Kubernetes, you don't actually write a whole lot of templates. You use a lot of Helm charts, right? So we can also introduce another layer of security, which would also check those Helm charts for any vulnerabilities. Now, what kind of vulnerabilities, you may ask? So for example, these Helm charts, when we apply, they also create a lot of containers, pods, and services in the backend. So the kind of vulnerabilities that we'll be checking for is the kind of pods these Helm charts are creating. Are they unnecessarily creating pods with root access where it is not required? So we use a solution such as DATRI. So DATRI is primarily used to scan any Kubernetes-specific vulnerabilities in Helm charts or your deployments or your templates and so forth and so on. So that step will add, so it will go and check your Helm charts and everything. And if everything is fine, and the thing is, in the good thing about that is, it's again a web-based console, but you can define your security profile, meaning what works best for your organization. So, like you said, it's a banking organization, right? So, at the same, you may have different types of organization. So, you'll define a security profile pre-baked in, like based on your infosec team, what is that they want to build, and then we'll incorporate that in the pipeline as well. So now we have another layer of security wherein we are checking not only the infrastructure as code, but also the Kubernetes charts and those configurations, right? And then if everything passes, that's where then what will we do is we'll kickstart the infrastructure build, which would encompass creating what should I say, the infrastructure, maybe an EKS cluster or anything like that, or maybe an EC2 instance through this Terraform or CloudFormation template. Now, obviously, one good thing about Datry is you're talking about this secrets, how will we store and all that, right? So when it comes to Kubernetes, we can use config maps and secrets, but so Datry scans that as well. Like if we have, say, for example, you have left some secret out in the wild, it will scan for that as well. And I think even Sneak does that, but we have not tested for Kubernetes as such. So yeah, so then when it comes to secret, there are a lot of options available. Either we can use the traditional Kubernetes. I mean, if you are using a Kubernetes kind of deployment, then we have an option for Kubernetes secrets. But let's say we are not, right? Let's say it's an EC2 based traditional deployment. It's not a microservice and all that. So then we can either use HashiCorp Vault, or we can use AWS own secret managers, those tools. So the way it would work is you would have your secrets created either through that, or if you are using some kind of CI/CD platform such as Azure DevOps, you can also create secret variables or variable groups. So even that you can create as a part of your pipeline, and then point your code towards those configurations. It could be AWS secrets or variables. Variables would be a lot more easier because obviously your pipeline is running, so it has got direct access to it. Now, in case if it is any of these third-party type of configurations, you obviously have to fetch those details. So there might be some delay, or maybe it may be microsecond, but still a delay is a delay. So that would be depending on the choice what we have. I mean, like depending on the performance what we want to see, we will choose one of those options. And then after that, after all these configurations are done, then we build our infrastructure or JS or whatever EC2 instance, or those configurations will be built. And at the end of the day, after the build, the entire build process completes, we'll have two things. One, our build artifact, build artifact to deploy, and second would be our infrastructure. Now this build pipeline will obviously be connected to a release pipeline. And there, let's say I'm taking purely an example of Azure DevOps because I've worked a lot in Azure DevOps, but it could be any CI/CD pipeline. It would be the same model, almost the same. As you were saying, right? I mean, it's basically just terminology, the build and release. Maybe it is called CI, Azure pipeline is here, it will be a GitLab pipeline somewhere else. But at the end of the day, what I would do is we will have multiple different environments there. And in Azure or in other environments, there's this concept of deployment gates. So what I mean by that is, now, since I've worked in the pharma space quite a bit, I know there are a lot of regulations around deploying to different environments. Typically, we'll have a CI/CD kind of a build, a smooth flowing build, wherein we have no checks for dev environments. When you build, everything goes as per the plan. You have your build artifact, it gets automatically, once the build artifact is successfully built, CD pipeline gets triggered automatically. It will take the artifact and deploy it automatically. But that's not the case for all the environments. For other environments, we have to place some form of deployment gates wherein some guy has to check in manually whether, okay, yeah, this is a valid build, or and so forth and so on. And based on that, then we will kickstart our deployment pipeline. So what would be a deployment pipeline will look like? It would be as simple as picking that build artifact and pushing in an EC2 instance and installing it, or it could be a pod configuration which we are changing with a new image tag, or an ECS service, or a task definition which we are updating, which will in turn trigger free creation of those pods and that. So that would be the deployment pipeline. So in the deployment, the checks that we will put in is whether the right kind of build is getting triggered through those deployment gates. It should not be the case that we are by mistake someone has triggered with some wrong build or wrong build artifact. So that's why this deployment gate would be there. And apart from that, so this entire thing we were talking about infrastructure build and right. So there comes access controls at the machine level. So for example, if you are using Kubernetes, right? So you obviously can integrate Kubernetes with a lot of OIDC providers such as from Azure AD to Keycloak or anything, any of that. So you can also impose those kind of RBAC controls. And normally I have not done that because in most organizations, fortunately or unfortunately, developers don't get too much into the Kubernetes. They don't want to get into that.
True.
Yeah. So we ourselves manage everything, but yeah, but if there are environments, then we can put those RBAC controls as a part of the whole configuration as well. So yeah,
Okay.
that would be the whole process.
Okay. So like follow-up question on that. So for an example, you have created the infrastructure, let's say AWS, and you have created the
Correct.
infrastructure. Can you incorporate some kind of tests that can make me feel that can ensure me that the infrastructure that I created is perfect? Let's say for an example, you created an EC2 instance, sorry, ECS service, and then you are using EC2 inside that, and then your application requires a lot of GPU. Okay, so we can get that by application. So how much gigs of RAM you have to use, how much what is the configuration that you need to use, how many cores. So you just write the CloudFormation template and it creates the infrastructure. So can you incorporate something inside your build or separate build, not an issue, that can confirm that whatever the application requires, the infrastructure that I wanted to create is created perfectly with all the specifications perfectly? Can you incorporate something? If anything, what it would be?
So basically, what you're saying is after your infrastructure is built, what you want to check is like has that been built as per the configuration which I
Yes.
have provided? So
Yes.
does it? Yeah.
And I don't want to do
So
that manually. Anything
sure, sure.
that is automated, yeah.
So yeah, so um, there are a couple of options. Now, there is one which I have not experimented too much with it, but there are few testing options in Terraform. I think through TerraGrunt they have a testing framework which basically, I mean, the same company which runs TerraGrunt, they have some testing configurations which you can run as a part of your pipelines itself, which will basically check. But that basically will check whether you will create the infrastructure that you will require or not. But if you want to, let's say if you're using AWS, then you can definitely use something like as simple as maybe a user data script, which will again query your instance metadata, because if it is EC2 and something like that, it could be as simple as you query the instance metadata and see, okay, what kind of information I'm getting. Or you can go maybe a step ahead and you can make use of AWS SDKs. Maybe you can write a small Go template, Go snippet or a Python snippet, which you can put it in your build pipeline, or as you said, maybe a separate pipeline. But I would say maybe it would be better if you put it in the same pipeline, which can I output the result of that, like what kind of configuration I have built, maybe in a tabular format or something like that. So yeah, so in those ways, I would test it. I will test the infrastructure by querying what has been created through APIs or using one of these frameworks. Now, as I said, I have not used a whole lot of it, but I'm definitely interested in that. And one of the reasons, to be honestly speaking, I'm not much nowadays. I tend to step away from this YAML bit and I try to use a lot more of CDK. Because then we can use our own programming languages to
Yeah, yeah.
create our infrastructure, and then you can, then you have the whole plethora of libraries available to do what in all testing you want to do.
Similar to this, have you heard about Pulumi?
Pulum, yes, yes, I've heard about it. So it
Kind
is
of like
basically,
same, you can use a lot of
huh,
languages in that. So yeah,
correct,
CDK
correct.
is good. I've not worked much on CDK as of now, like more on a cloud formation, but yeah.
Yeah, even I just started, and I was definitely exploring Pulumi as well, because Pulumi, I think, so Terraform, what they have done is Terraform also gives us that option, but they have kind of worked with AWS CDK a lot. So they are also calling their services CDK TF or something.
Mm-hmm.
So which is quite similar to CDK. But Pulumi was there like from day one. They had been into this
Yeah, yeah.
in
I
this
mean, you
mode.
can
Yeah,
even write JavaScript, I guess, in that, like
yeah,
other languages. I
yeah.
mean, if you
I
are
have
more of
seen
a
even
developer
.NET.
type, yeah, you can do that.
Correct,
Not that much,
correct,
done much hands-on on it, but yeah, I have an idea.
correct.
Okay, cool. So, in this whole pipeline, when we talked about static and dynamic testing, let's talk about the part where we just integrate, but we do not generally do it. So, unit testing and integration testing. So, like, what is the basic difference between both of them, and what I can do to incorporate a unit testing and integration testing over here? As an architect, I'm saying I'm not asking you to write those tests, but what would you do to integrate, and like, what is the basic difference between unit test and integration test in this application?
So as far as the testing, like if I'm writing my own code, if I'm incorporating these unit tests and integration tests, the one of the things which I've seen is unit tests could be as simple as, let's say you write a function to
Mm-hmm.
add two numbers, right? One
Mm-hmm.
plus two equal to three. So your unit test will obviously determine what you expect versus what you got. So basically, it will trigger the function as a part of the test cases, and then that's it. You will find the difference and it passes or fails based on that. And integration test is, let's say you're using. So I came across this concept of integration testing when I was learning Go.
Mm-hmm.
So in Go, I was basically I was trying to mimic this bash scripting thing, which wherein I was trying to do something instead of using a bash script, use a Go template. They have
Mm-hmm.
some lot of libraries.
You said
So,
batch
so
or
integ-
bash?
bash,
Batch.
yeah,
Windows,
they're
right?
regular. No, the Linux ones.
That's
Bash
bash.
scripting.
BASH, right?
Yeah, bash.
Okay, I thought BATCH. I mean, the
Oh no,
like
no.
Windows
Bash is
one.
like Windows. Yeah, I know. Yeah,
Yeah.
batch jobs and all that. Yeah. So to me, integration testing is like when you use some external entity in your code. So, for example, let's say in your function you're calling something else. So test that part is what I understand is what is integration testing.
Okay, I mean, added to this kind of sub same, added to this, like if you have three, four things working in unison, and you want to test them whether they'll work as a unit, as a like single thing, like, uh, but if you talk about a car, there are multiple things
Mhm.
working inside and working at one time, like kind of that.
Okay.
So like if in this application, if I want to see like if I've created three, four services, all of the services on the AWS are working in unison perfectly. So that would be an example of integration testing.
Got it.
I mean, you can write Java code for that. That's
Correct.
totally possible, and you can run through. I guess there are multiple applications. I guess Maven test is there, Gradle test is there.
Huh.
Gradle has been used a lot these days. So yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think this part is good. So like, what are your applications running on? Are you using Kubernetes or something?
Yeah, Kubernetes, I mean, for you mean to say the deployment part, right? The
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure side of things. Yeah, Kubernetes, in some cases, sorry, we also are using Azure AKS. That is
Okay.
purely very few applications who don't want to move to AWS EKS. But yeah, we are running in different. And there is a couple of teams in my present organization which also uses ECS
Mm-hmm.
because it was see, the way this pharma companies usually work, and I experienced this in bioclinic also, is they acquire a lot of smaller companies
Mm-hmm.
and then they become the team. So what normally happens is they will have some form of infrastructure of their own, which normally doesn't change. So that's why there is like a lot of different types of deployments or infrastructure. But yeah, to your point, Kubernetes and ECS primarily for containerized workloads. For the non-container workloads, it is the traditional EC2s.
Okay.
We just had a session 2 months ago about serverless. There are few data science teams which are planning to use it, but we are not there yet. I mean, we will start that journey soon.
Okay. Fair enough. So on a scale of like 1 to 10, how comfortable are you in Kubernetes as of now?
Kubernetes, I would say around 6.
Okay, so I'll just ask on the basis of like how do you architect? I don't want to go into the nitty gritties, the number and stuff. Okay, so how do you travel to the office? I mean, what commute do you use generally?
I mostly work from home. And
No, no, like
this work
pre-COVID.
from
Pre-COVID, how do you used to travel?
pre-COVID also I was working from home.
100% work from home, huh?
Yeah, 100% work from home. That was many perks of bioclinic, I would say.
Uh,
One of the many perks.
Great, great, great. Okay, so have you heard about this application known as Quick Ride?
Quick Read, yeah, I know.
Yeah, yeah. So
Because
like
when I
it's
was working in IBM, I actually maybe I had used it. Yeah, once or twice. Yes, yes.
yeah, yeah. So
So it's
basically, it's
basically
a
like correct,
carpooling kind
correct,
of thing. You are
exactly.
traveling from one place to another. People can carpool.
Yes,
I even I have used
yes.
it that. Okay. Uh, Consider Quick Ride wants to increase the number of their servers simultaneously by scaling their platform. Okay.
Platform. Okay.
And how do you think the company will deal with the servers and their installation?
So right now, is it like they are using this
They
traditional
are on traditional,
server-based
yeah,
model where they
and
are
they want to move
virtualizing?
to Kubernetes. And as an architect, how would you do it?
Okay, so first thing is I have to understand the architecture that is there presently. When I say understand the architecture, what I would like to know, I don't need to know the internals of a microservice. Obviously, you said Kubernetes, so I'm guessing here this is a microservice architecture. So what I would try to understand is that how it works. So, for example, if it is on-prem, that means there would be some form of physical load balancer that would be attached, like what kind of services, and obviously on-prem there would be some limitation to scaling. So I would try to understand like which are the services which have like a lot of traffic. If it is a web application, obviously, or what kind of services uh, I would say are like critical. When I say critical, so based on the load, the performance, in fact. And based on that, what I will do is I will design an architecture in Kubernetes, and also I would understand this whole workflow in the organization presently, like what I was talking to you earlier about, like do developers need access to this Kubernetes cluster? What kind of environments we have? Like do we have dev, val, prod, whatever. And once I have that understanding, I'll try to mimic that in Kubernetes with the components that Kubernetes has. So, for example, if they're using some form of physical load balancer today, like, for example, like an F5. And so instead of that, what I will do is I will use either ingress controller or load balancer in AWS, obviously written in Kubernetes, and similar to that, yeah, I mean, as I said, the services are going to be the most important aspect, like which service is most important. So based on that, we can design the workloads based on so deployments and your replicas based on that part. So that's how I will design the architecture, like depending on how it is structured today at a higher level. Yeah, I'll try to mimic that in the Kubernetes environment.
Okay, okay.
And obviously,
Yeah.
since you're using Kubernetes, then now you're scaling, the issue of the scaling goes away. Like you have to use VMs, maybe you have on-prem some sort of mechanism where you increase the workload, maybe through some automation in on-prem as well, like maybe a Power CLI script or something like that. But now here in Kubernetes, obviously the scaling problem, the way it goes away is you attach your vendor specific monitoring to it, wherein it detects the workload and scales your pods based on that.
Okay, okay. Similar to this, for example, consider a situation in which a company is using monolithic architecture and
Okay.
it is using a number of products. Now, you know that today, like industry is moving towards like Kubernetes or something. Their monolithic architecture started causing some problems because of something. Okay, any reason.
Okay.
So everyone is moving to Kubernetes. So how would you think that a company shifted from monolithic to microservices and deploy their services using uh, Kubernetes?
So even before we talk about Kubernetes, the first thing what we have to do is split that monolith to microservice. So that would mean, obviously, that is not the complete job of a DevOps guy, but you will need to also involve guys like software architects into the conversation. So, and the reason I say that is because breaking a monolith to microservice is the biggest challenge. The Kubernetes part is easy, I would
Easy,
say, as
yeah.
compared to that one. The main part would be you have to understand those domains. Like for example, I know you must have heard this a zillion times. Whenever people talk about this monolith to microservice breakup, they always take up an e-commerce example. So shipping, those kind of services, those domains you have to identify first. So first, what you have to identify is how will I break my monolith? That's the first challenge. And alongside with that, then comes the challenge of so let's say you have figured it out. You figured out that my monolith now splits into 10 different types of microservices. Now, alongside that, you also have to figure out the kind of testing you are doing right now, how that will split out, right? Because it is like different type of services. So obviously you have to rewrite maybe some of that logic as well. And then comes, I would say, one of the more critical part wherein how do these services communicate with each other? Is it an event based or how does it? So that part also we have to figure out. So there you have a lot of tools, like Kafka, RabbitMQ. So those things have to be decided. Once you have figured out all this part, like, once you have broken down your microservices and like you have architect at a high level at least, then you start thinking about the maybe the Kubernetes side of things. But even before that, what you have to do is you have to create at least um, uh, e- even before going to Kubernetes, you have to find out which distribution makes sense for you, because there are a lot of different types of distributions. Now it depends on your cloud vendor as well. Like if it's AWS, you can go to EKS, but then you have to understand, like for example, so in Kubernetes there are a lot of things which are available to us, but not all are at a mature level. So the API versioning, right? So which one is at alpha, beta, or which one is at that maturity stage? That you have to also understand, because let's say you plan to use something, some Kubernetes service. Maybe it is something that is coming up or that makes sense for your application, but unfortunately, it is at some kind of a different API version, or maybe your cloud provider doesn't support that. So these things you will take into consideration even before you jump the gun or you pull the trigger on Kubernetes. So these are the things also you have to take into account. And then of course, I forgot one critical thing when I was explaining about this breakup and all. You have to figure out about your monitoring also. Obviously now it is no longer a monolith. You're not monitoring a server or
Yeah, yeah,
maybe
true.
one service or something, right? So then you have to figure out some kind of an APM, like maybe Neuralink, Dynatrace, Datadog. There are like a million tools in the market. You have to do some kind of proof of concept, try to understand which one works best. And what I have seen is this is an experience through personal pains, I would say. This APM tools implementation is not always easy. And the reason I say that is because when you even let's say you break up the microservice and still you're using some legacy frameworks in those, these APM tools don't gel well with them.
Yeah, yeah,
Not
they
all
don't
of them.
support. I mean, and
Correct.
kind of
And
there is no backward compatibility of the legacy stuff. Yeah,
no,
yeah.
not really. And I remember we had a lot of challenge migrating one .NET Core application to New Relic. Now, luckily, New Relic was bit configurable, and their architects were good enough or kind enough to help us through that effort. But yeah, I have seen few situations where people just say, okay, yeah, now we have decided microservice, this is the way to go. We'll pick this, they'll do some form of basic testing with this APMs, and then they will port over and then never use APM. So,
What do you
so
suggest
yeah.
in that case, like Dynatrace or New Relic?
So again, it depends on your use case. And what I've seen is Dynatrace is obviously a lot more expensive than New Relic. But the thing is, what I liked about New Relic, at least my engagement with New Relic was with the people that I had worked with, they were very good. So the most important aspect, right, when you pick any tool or service, you also need to look at the support part of it. That I think many times we ignore because see, the sales people will paint you a rosy picture in those sales calls. But proper interact with the support, their engineers, their architects, then that's where you get to know how good they are doing their job. So it should not be the case that you implement and then you get stuck for hours and hours altogether. You're not able to figure out. Now you have a tool which is the whole purpose of the tool is to you to figure out those get you out of those difficult situations. But for you to even work with that, it's a challenge. So coming to that, coming back to the question, I would say there would be multiple factors. Budget, number one, how much of budget you have before implementing, and second thing is operability, like how good the tool works with your application, how difficult the configuration is going to be, and what kind of data you're getting out of that tool. So I had seen, in the same case. So the main idea why we wanted to implement APM for that particular tool was we want to cut down our troubleshooting timeline. So we didn't had an APM implemented for that tool for a long time. So troubleshooting was a big mess. So for some reason, the application was moved to a microservice model, but there was not proper monitoring. So every time something used to break down, we have to troubleshoot the entire thing. So that was the main goal, to reduce that gap and get a clear visibility of what is going on in the application. So let's say some service breaks down, it should not be the case that you are troubleshooting everything else apart from that. So these kind of visibilities we wanted. So one of the key aspects was the code level information gathering by these tools. So basically, it can tell you like which class level or where it could be a possible issue. So those form of integrations you need to check during the proof of concept. Those are the key, I would say, key indicators whether your APM meets your requirement or not.
Okay. So one last question for today. Following up on the last question. So let's say the architect from the application has done everything. Okay. Now what will happen on the deployment side? How will the company will solve the problem on the deployment side?
So when you say problem on the deployment side, what do you mean by that?
I mean, monolithic is something like you just have one artifact or something. You can just deploy it over. But in microservices, what will change in microservices, and how will you deploy them? How will you connect them? There has to be a gatekeeper or something. How will you create the registry and something like what could be the problems that can come, and how will you deploy them?
Okay. So when it comes to monolith, as you rightly said, there would be one build and release pipeline, right? I mean, one straightforward process. But in microservice, the way it will always work is we'll create a build and release environment for each of them separately. And obviously, it will have their own Git repos also. So that's how I will build it. So I will create one pipeline for each microservice. So basically, that pipeline will have all those components which we discussed in the first question, right? But per microservice. So in each microservice, we'll have that. And let's say, for example, so you were talking about some kind of a gates, right? So for example, let's say there are 12 different microservices, but three different teams manage it. So the way I would manage those kind of deployments is put some form of RBAC if it is supported in CI/CD, which it is. Give the appropriate people access to those pipelines, who are required, not more than that, so that they can only manage their own environment. And of course, the Git repos and so forth and so on. So long story short, I will definitely split out these environments not environments as such, because one more thing is, now since you have different pipelines, right? Obviously, there needs to be a different one pipeline which would build this infrastructure as well, because obviously you will not want to create infrastructure at every, or let's say you have 10 microservices. So that would be a different infrastructure build pipeline also. Or you can, if you're using Azure DevOps, you can have those task groups, wherein one group is for building infrastructure, one for microservices, like that. But yeah, we will definitely have to split out our build and release pipelines per microservice. I think that's the only way to go. I will not say only way. I mean, that would be a best practice. I would recommend.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm done.